Chapter 1. The Flame is Lit. Part 1. Before the Storm. The village of Bromwich, lying on the borders of the Great Wessex forests, was quiet under the setting sun, bathed in hues of gold and amber. To its people it was a safe and tranquil place, where the woods whispered their ancient secrets and the farmlands were tended with care. Bromwich was small, and life moved at the pace of the seasons. The villagers worked the land, raised their families, and told tales around the fire at night, rarely touched by the wars and conflicts that plagued the larger world. For many, it was an isolated haven. For Aldric, it was home. He had lived in Bromwich his entire life, in the house his father built with his own hands. The home was simple, a thatched roof, walls of wood and stone, but it was filled with the warmth of family. His father, Aldric, had once been a soldier, a man hardened by battle in the wars between the local lords. Though he rarely spoke of those days, he now worked as a farmer, his large hands rough from the toil of the earth, though they had once wielded a sword with deadly precision. Aldric, only 17, was a reflection of his father's strength, though not yet fully grown into it. He was tall for his age, lean and muscular from years of hard labour, but still with the sharpness of youth about him. His hair, dark and unruly, often fell into his eyes as he worked, but it was his gaze that was most striking, intelligent and always watching. Aldric's quiet nature belied a mind constantly in motion, calculating and observing. His mother, Edgifu, often remarked that he was like his father, silent but strong, a protector even before he needed to be. Then there was Elswyth, Aldric's younger sister, only 15, but already wise beyond her years. Elswyth was quick-witted and sharp-tongued, never missing an opportunity to tease her brother. Her long brown hair fell in waves around her face, and her smile was the bright flame that warmed their family. She loved to laugh, often filling their home with her playful banter. Aldric and Elswyth were inseparable, their bond forged in the fires of sibling rivalry and love. They had shared everything, chores, stories, and even their mischievous adventures in the woods surrounding their home. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the village, life in Bromwich felt as peaceful as it ever had. The family sat around their wooden table sharing a modest supper of bread, meat and ale. The fire crackled warmly in the hearth, its flickering light casting a soft glow over the room. "You should have seen him today, Father," Elswyth teased, her voice light with laughter. "He nearly fell off the roof 3 times trying to fix that hole." Aldric rolled his eyes, his mouth twitching in a half-smile as he finished chewing a piece of bread. "It was only once," he corrected, though the truth was he had been clumsy. Roofing wasn't his strong suit, but he didn't want to admit that in front of his sister. Aldric chuckled, shaking his head. "Every man has his strengths, Aldric. Yours might not be mending roofs, but you'll find it in time." Aldric looked to his father, feeling the weight of those words. Aldric rarely gave praise or even spoke of the future, but when he did, his words were measured and meant to last. Aldric had always looked up to him, admired his strength and wisdom, though he often wondered about the life his father had led before settling down as a farmer. The old soldier's past was something he kept closely guarded, as if the memories were too painful to share. "You'll get there, brother," Elswyth said, softer now, her teasing smile replaced with something more genuine. "Just don't break your neck doing it." Aldric smirked, reaching across the table to ruffle her hair. "Don't worry about me." But even in that moment of peace, a shadow loomed outside their small world, and the fragility of their life in Bromwich was about to be shattered in a way Aldric could never have imagined. It was deep into the night when Aldric was jolted awake by a sound, distant but growing louder. At first he thought it was the wind, but as his senses sharpened, he recognized the unmistakable thud of hooves on the dirt road. His heart began to race. No one rode into Bromwich at this hour. Throwing off his blanket, he rose quietly from his bed, grabbing his boots and hastily pulling them on. The air inside the house was cold, and the silence that followed the hoofbeats was almost worse than the noise itself. Aldric moved to the window, the moonlight casting pale shadows across the room as he peered outside. His blood ran cold. In the distance, near the edge of the village, he saw them. Figures moving swiftly between the houses, torches raised high, their flames flickering like malevolent spirits in the dark. They weren't traders or messengers, they were bandits. The village was under attack. Aldric's instincts kicked in. He rushed into the main room where his father was already up, standing by the door. Osric's old sword was in his hand, the blade catching the light of the fire as if it had never been set aside. His eyes were hard, filled with a fierce determination Aldric had never seen before. "Get your sister!" Osric ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos outside. "Take her to the woods! Hide!" "What about you?" Aldric asked, his heart pounding in his chest. "I'll hold them off," Osric replied, gripping his sword tightly. "But you must go, Aldric, now!" Aldric hesitated for a brief moment, but the sound of breaking glass and shouting from the neighbouring houses snapped him into action. He nodded, turning to his sister's room. Elswyth was already awake, her eyes wide with fear as she stood in the doorway. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Bandits," Aldric said, his tone tight. "We need to go." Without another word, he grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the back door. Eadgifu appeared from the shadows, her face pale but resolute. "Go, quickly. Hide and don't come out until it's safe." Aldric swallowed the lump in his throat and squeezed his mother's hand briefly before leading Elswyth into the night. The cool air hit them as they stepped outside, and the village was alive with chaos. Flames licked at the rooftops of the houses, and the sounds of shouting, screaming, and steel on steel filled the air. The night, once calm, had become a nightmare. They ran toward the woods, their feet pounding against the grass as they raced to escape the carnage. Elswyth clutched Aldric's hand tightly, her breath coming in quick, panicked gasps. Just as they neared the safety of the trees, a voice rang out from the darkness. "Well, well," the man said, his voice rough and mocking. "What do we have here? 2 little rabbits trying to run from the hunt?" Aldric froze, his blood turning to ice as a figure stepped out from the shadows. He was a hulking man towering over them, his face obscured by the hood of his dark cloak. A torch in his hand illuminated his cruel smile, and a long, curved sword hung at his side. Aldric's mind raced, his instincts screaming at him to run. The man was too large, too dangerous. There was no way he could fight him, not with just a small hunting knife and no time to think. He felt Elswyth tremble beside him, her hand gripping his arm in terror. The man took a step forward, his eyes glinting in the firelight. "Run all you like, boy," he sneered, "but you can't outrun me." Without another thought, Aldric grabbed Elswyth's hand tighter and turned to run, his heart pounding in his chest. His legs moved faster than they ever had before, the trees blurring past as they sprinted for their lives. Behind them, the bandits' heavy footsteps thundered through the night, closer and closer with every passing second. The heat from the fires followed them, the crackling of burning wood filling the air, along with the shouts of the bandits ransacking the village. As they ran through the narrow paths between the buildings, Aldric glanced back, seeing the towering figure gaining ground. They darted around a corner, and Aldric's breath caught in his throat as he saw it. A house, its roof ablaze, crumbling under the weight of the flames. The structure groaned, the wood blackened and brittle, ready to collapse at any moment. "Keep running!" Aldric shouted, his voice hoarse. But just as they passed the burning building, the roof gave way with a deafening crash. A wall of fire and debris came down upon them. Aldric felt a sharp pain in his head as something struck him hard. The world spun, his vision blurring as the heat of the flames enveloped him. His hand slipped from Elswyth's grasp. The sound of her scream pierced the air, but then everything went dark.